Why are comic book fans so adverse to change? Now, going through social media and seeing the opinions of people in the same space as I am, something that I've noticed is that there is an underlying sense of contradiction to a lot of what they say. So if I'm going to go through a list, let's say some people think that comics stay the same, and because of that, they're stale. At the same time, though, when comics do change, these fans cry about bad writing, or character assassination, or there being an agenda being pushed. When there's a legacy character, like a Kyle Rayner or a Wally West, fans just start crying for the original to come back. And while I did give you two famous examples of characters who ended up succeeding in the end, in the past, when these characters were new in their roles, people were crying for Hal Jordan to come back, crying for Barry Allen to come back, and then eventually, when they got accustomed to that change, then they started complaining when the writers and the publishing line found a way to meet fan demand, right? When they found a way in and they brought back the original, and at that point, they started clamoring again, saying that the story now has no stakes because they brought back the original character. But it's like, do you guys realize you were the same people that were arguing about them being changed in the first place? And now you're having this late realization that you didn't even want that before, right? But the problem is that what I think it is that some stories make certain audience members very uncomfortable. And their first response to this discomfort, per se, is to retaliate, to fight back, to kind of argue against what's being pushed onto them, right? And in my opinion, what I've realized, the more uncomfortable a run makes you feel, the more it challenges its reader to kind of engage with the material, to stay along for the ride, to see where it goes. These are the type of runs that become game-changing, right? The ones that really lead to great changes into the mythos of these characters. But a lot of time people don't really want to put in the effort to stay with the book because they're so accustomed to what happened before. So say a Flash book, you expect the family aspect of these characters, right? The Flash family is big for a reason, right? But if you see another book after it where they completely change the vibe or the genre, people tend to turn their brain off and say, no, this is not what I paid for, which is totally valid, of course, but to completely write off an entire run and say that it's garbage, to say that it's horrible, just because it pulled out a certain feeling in you that you didn't like, in my opinion, I can call you out on that. That is not valid in the slightest. Of course, not everything is made for everybody, but to say that something is bad because it doesn't fit a certain genre that you're expecting is such a limiting way of looking at comics. Comics is the best medium just because it leads to so much different just integrations of genres, different integrations of writing styles, right? It can switch on a dime. Your favorite character can go from street level to cosmic to supernatural to crime noir to whatever the writer wants, and limiting them to a certain category just feels like a disservice to the medium of comics, right? I know that there is things like a character Bible, right? Character Bibles are expected to kind of keep the synchronicity of the character, right? To keep it somewhat the same. And it tells the writers what they should and they shouldn't do, right? It's what is expected of them, what these characters are known for. For example, let me talk about Peter Parker. He has brown hair, he shoots webs out of his web shooters, and he has something called the Parker luck. And what that is, to the uninitiated, is whenever something is going right in Peter's life, something bad is eventually going to happen. These are staples to the Peter Parker character that can't really be changed. And yes, these character Bibles are something that's available for most of the more popular characters and something most writers go back to, but it isn't the end-all be-all. If that was the case, these characters wouldn't be able to develop and change. Something that I've seen is that a lot of people were very against Batman in the 2000s. Now, Batman in the 2000s is written by all-star writers. I'm telling you, like Ed Brubaker, Greg Rucka, Devin Grayson, and the whole lot, right? Scott Beatty was in there, there was some Jeff Loeb, but these were the writers of Batman. And in this period of time, instead of being the more pulpy type of comics from yesteryear. What they did was make it fully lean into the crime noir aspect of Batman, and because of this, they really made some gritty choices that eventually piled itself onto Batman. All of these bad things just went at Batman one after the other, to the point where there was a breaking point, right? And this eventually changed his behavior, and people did not like that. But I'm going to ask you a question. If all these bad things happen to you in your life, will you stay the same person, or will there be some sort of out of character moment? Out of character moments aren't necessarily bad if there's a precedent to why it's occurring in the first place. And people fully writing off this era is so horrible to me, considering that these writers not only created some of the best Batman work of all time that goes really underappreciated, but if you look at it, these writers know how to write Batman well. From their previous work, they can write him well. In these runs, they wrote him well. And this shift does eventually happen, but you could see that they can write the character well. It's not that they're misinterpreting Bruce himself, they're building something up. And if you had any sort of intelligible part in your body, you would realize that this was the start of a character arc. That they fully did, there was a complete loop, and it brought Batman into a better place. And it led to more character work for Bruce that led to him being one of, if not the most interesting character in his series. And probably one of the most interesting periods of Batman's character in his entire publication history, which in and of itself, it does seem like a no-brainer, right? Your main character should be very interesting and the most interesting character, but Batman, you have to realize he has some of the best supporting casts and the best villains of all time. And in some sort of mush, since we're already acclimated to Batman, there are going to be moments where a guest character or a character that doesn't show up all the time appears and of course steals the spotlight. Bruce at that point in time was so interesting to me, and he still is, of course. He's my favorite fictional character, and there are moments in the Morrison era of Batman that are as good if not better, but that period of time has really stuck with me to the point that I get really frustrated when I see people write it off. But in my effort to rationalize this, I feel like the reason why people really didn't like it is because of, hear me out, Batman memes. Now, there are a lot of Batman memes that say that Batman is a bad father, that he will break every bone in your body to the point where you have $100,000 in medical bills, to I don't know, breaking all of your limbs for jaywalking or something. I don't know, but these are the type of memes that kind of get pushed into the mainstream, right? And anybody with any sort of Batman understanding knows that these are jokes. Batman goes for the most efficient and effective method of taking down his enemies, I don't know, taking a pressure point to the shoulder and then making them fall in an instant. That's what Batman would do. But these people, when they see this getting pushed, when they see this narrative getting pushed, they want to fight back against it just because it reminds them. Seeing Batman written in this kind of negative and self-destructive way kind of reminds them of these memes, and because of that, they don't want to have any sort of canon material reflect all of these, I guess, slanderous material of Batman, even though as a huge Batman fan, of course, the #1 Batman glazer, if you've been here for a while, you know what that means. But I just see it as jokes. Of course, some people are going to have a very negative reaction to this getting pushed. Post-production Natrix here, just stopping by to say that 90% of you guys are not subscribed. Remember, if you enjoyed this video or any of my previous videos in the past, remember to subscribe. It really helps the channel out a ton. And yeah, that's all from me, and on with the video. Another example that I noticed that really ticked me off was there was this panel on the DC subreddit where somebody posted Superboy Jonathan Kent, this panel from the Rebirth era of Superman, where his cat got stolen by this bird did a drive-by, brother. This bird took his cat, and as anyone would, he got very mad, and Kryptonians, when they get mad, their eyes turn red, and he tried to shoot, maybe not even tried, it could have just been subconscious, but he shot a heat vision beam at the bird. But he has no training, right? If you were a Kryptonian, you would assume that your beam would just get the bird, right? Become narrow enough to get the bird. But it became an entire explosive blast that not only incinerated the bird itself, but also his cat. And he just ended up bawling his eyes out until the heat went away. And this is one of those things that, Tomasi and Gleason used as character development to show Jonathan that he can't just lash out. This entire world is essentially made out of cardboard, if you want to like relate it back to Justice League Unlimited, one of my favorite shows of all time. But you can't ever lose your cool. You are a Kryptonian. You have to realize the severity of your actions. Everything you do will have consequences, and because of how powerful you are, that's like 10 times so, right? You just stomping because you're mad on a bad day could just shatter the entire continent. So he has to realize this, and people were really pressed in the comments, people who didn't read this book, and they're like, why would they do this to the cat? This is bad writing, blah, 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 blah. They should have just killed the bird. First of all, killing the bird would have done nothing because he just wanted his cat back. Second of all, yes, the cat did die, and that is unfortunate, but how else would he have such a stark contrast in the way he thinks? How would he completely pivot from this childish mindset that he has without something traumatic happening to him that was all his fault? Just because there's a lot of edgy, grimdark things that are coming out recently doesn't mean that the most hopeful of characters can't have conflict. Superman as a character, he is not just all hope core that people are kind of pushing online, that Superman is just hope, 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 hope. No, Superman, yes, he is a man of hope, but you have to realize, just like Grant Morrison said, he appeared not in Hope comics, he appeared in Action comics. He is a man of action, and because of this, he's not just gonna talk to a bully. If there's a dictator, he is going to punch down. He's the champion of the oppressed, and how do you be a champion of the oppressed? You liberate. You fight those who disrespect the rights of others. You're not only a shield for the people, but also a sword. That's what Superman is. He's not just gonna have like this nice dilly-dally talk to you just because, I don't know, he's just like this super duper nice guy. He's not the nice guy that we see in like all this like fan stuff. Yes, he's one of the most relatable and understanding heroes in the DC universe, but if he sees you on a killing spree, he's not just gonna talk to you and be like a giant sunshine. Like, you know, like he is a superhero at the end of the day. And as a hero, you have to take action. You have to fight. You're not just going to deal with the best of humanity. As someone who has super hearing, you hear all of the worst aspects of the world, and because of your morals, your foundation, how you were raised, you still keep your head up high because you know the potential of what humans can really be. That's what Superman is. He is a light in the darkness. He isn't compelling if everything around him is bright. What makes Superman interesting is that he is the one source of truth and justice in a world that sees it as unfashionable, in a world that would rather turn a blind eye to all of this injustice. He fights it head on as a champion of the people. That's what makes him compelling. It's not out of character because he does this. He has his bad days too. He also lashes out. But what makes him Superman is that he ends up holding it back when it matters most. But overall, guys, what do you think? What are some of the most annoying interactions you've had with the fandom? What are some character moments that people see as out of character, but you're like, no, that's just rational for what he would feel? Right? If I were in their position, I would feel the exact same way. So what are some of the moments that you kind of heavily relate to or see as just being human? It's not out of character. But yeah, guys, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care. Peace.